What's up, y'all? It's your boy back with another reaction video, and I will be reacting to creepy stories submitted by subscribers based on true events. This is from Unit 522, and we're just gonna get right up into it. It's like 18 minutes long, so yeah. Without further ado, let's go. Here we go. Oh shit. Oh fuck.
This happened after a long and boring day at school. While returning back to my house, I was pretty excited, as it was a Friday, which meant no school the next day. While approaching my house, I noticed that our garage door was left open and the lights were on. My dad had left for a business trip that same day, and I figured that he must have left in a hurry and had forgotten to close the door. I didn't give it much thought and switched off the
Yeah,
lights
so
and
don't
closed the
check
garage
anything.
door. I played some video games and watched a movie. My mom.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, anytime I've come home and I see a door ajar that I don't remember leaving ajar, or window open, or whatever, something like is out of place, um, I always check the whole house. Like, because I don't fuck around with this stuff. Since I've seen stories about people having, people like homeless people that got into their house and lived in their house for like 2 weeks or months or whatever, and they never did. They be like, why is my food disappearing? And why it seem like there's dirt and stuff here? I'm like, man, I check everything. Anytime anything like is out of place, I check this shit.
Mom had to go to her friend's house for whatever reason, so I had the house all to myself, and it was nighttime. I went to the kitchen to make myself a drink, and I saw that the garage lights were switched on again. I figured my mother must have gone in there for some reason
See,
and
there
had
you
left the
go.
lights on,
Assume
but in
shit.
the back of my mind, I couldn't shake this unsettling feeling that something was wrong. I went into the garage again, and right away, I saw that every drawer in my dad's workshop area had been opened, and many of his tools were laying around. Whoever was in his garage was surely looking for something. I figured that it had to have been my mom, but when she briefly stopped by the house earlier that evening, I didn't notice her going to the garage, and she wasn't there for very long either. I was honestly creeped the hell out by this point. I didn't see anybody else in the garage, so I went back into my house, making sure to lock the door behind me. As I was watching TV, from behind me, I heard the knob on the door that led into the garage start to violently rattle. In a panic, I got up from the couch and stared in horror at the door. After the person on the other side failed to open it, they let out a loud scream and began to viciously pound on the door. I quickly ran upstairs to grab my cell phone, and then I got it into my head that I needed to exit the house before calling the police. I guess with all the adrenaline running through my body, I didn't notice that all the loud bashing noises from downstairs had come to a stop. Upon coming back down, I immediately made for the front door,
Right, because he's already in
which
the
I had to
house.
go through the living room to get to. Looking back, I probably should have went through the back. I was very lucky, because when I entered the living room, I saw the intruder. He was a very big man and had an axe in his hands, which he had taken from my dad's workshop.
Whoa.
The man had his back
This
to me and appeared to
escalated
be looking behind
really
an
quickly.
armchair in the far corner of the living room. I'm guessing that the TV, which was still playing the movie, masked my footsteps as I entered the room. I didn't go back upstairs. That would have been stupid. I turned around and hastily made my way to the back door. After running a short distance, I called the cops and reported the incident. They informed me that they would be there in 5 minutes. I then went to my neighbor's house, who was a really good friend of my father's, and waited there until the cops showed up. To make a long story short, the police searched the whole house, and just as I feared, the man was nowhere to be found.
Of course.
They discovered that the intruder had smashed through the door in the garage with the axe. It was kind of a flimsy door, and it would have taken him a few good swings to break through it. I called my mom, and she came back as soon as possible. After she heard about the incident, she hugged me and was grateful that nothing had happened to me. I honestly don't know if my dad had forgotten to close the garage door, or if the intruder somehow opened it. But regardless, whenever you leave your house, always double check to make sure your doors are locked and secured, because it's a scary world we live in. A little background information to set the scene. I live in a house that is directly across the street from a cul-de-sac. Beyond the cul-de-sac,
Well, I think about running up and like kicking this dude in his dick. Like, just running up full force. Just kidding. Like, why you stand in the road like that?
is the entrance to a forest that stretches on for miles. The woods are pretty dense in terms of trees and bushes. When I was younger, I would love to ride my bike or scooter down various pathways through the forest and back to my house. Since it was a short distance, there was a bit of a downhill slope. One day when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, I was riding my bike down the street that led to the cul-de-sac. There was multiple openings at the end of the cul-de-sac where you could clearly see the forest from the street. I was distracted by someone standing in the woods off in the distance. I wasn't paying attention, and I accidentally ran into a small car that was parked outside one of the houses. It was kind of embarrassing, but thankfully I wasn't injured or anything. The person began pacing back and forth frantically, like they were trying to decide on something. It was then that I noticed that this person was wearing what looked like a black raincoat. He didn't have his hood up, so I could clearly see his head. He was a balding middle-aged man. And I'm not entirely sure, but I think he was talking to himself. I was a bit weirded out, so I hid behind the car that I ran into, and lifted my head just high enough over the trunk so I could still see what was happening. It was then that I saw something in his hand that seemed to give off a bright shine every time he walked under a ray of light coming through one of the overhead trees.
He had a knife or
It was a knife, and from where I was, I could see that the knife appeared to be stained red. I gathered up my bike and was about to head straight back to my house. When I looked back to where the dude was, I froze. The man had stopped pacing and was now staring right at me. I panicked and dropped down behind the car, letting go of my bike, which made a loud metallic clank as it collided with the street. Not knowing what to do,
I would have
I
got the
waited
fuck
for
out
about
of
30
there.
seconds before peeking my head back out from behind the car.
He coming
The
at you
person
full
was still standing
sprint.
there, just staring. Then suddenly, the person started sprinting towards me, letting out a deranged scream, followed by something that I will never forget as long as I live.
Hit him with damn
I'm going
bike.
to string you up and cut you, you little shit! I launched myself back onto my
Really?
bike and started pedaling home as fast as I
Should
could.
do that in the first place.
When I made it to the end of the street, I turned back and saw the psycho walking back into the woods. When I got back home for dinner, I didn't say anything about it to my parents or my sister. I was afraid that they wouldn't let me ride down the cul-de-sac anymore. I guess being a dumb kid, that was more important than my own safety.
Stupid, dumb, idiot kid.
It's been about 10 years, and we still live in the same house, and haven't heard about any kidnappings or murders happening around here in the past decade. So I'm not entirely sure what that person was doing out there. Maybe he was just some mentally unhinged nutcase off his meds. Maybe he was a crazed drug addict. Whatever the case may be, I'm glad I didn't meet him and his knife up close and personal. I used to date this guy named Jake. I met him through mutual friends, and at first things were okay between us. But there was something about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Jake seemed to just kind of show up around places where I would be, without any kind of setup. This happened to me more than a few times, mind you. It was like I was being stalked by my own boyfriend. He gave off this weird vibe that would have been assigned to anyone not to date this person. But to be honest, I wasn't in a very good place in my life at the time. I was very depressed, had a bit of a drug problem, and had very low self-esteem. He knew that. So when he pursued me, I went with it. We ended up dating for about 2 years. About halfway into the relationship, he went to jail, and I ended up having to move in with my parents. When I would make the 2-hour drive to visit him, I began to notice that his personality took a turn for the
Visit
worst.
him.
He became very possessive and noticeably more uncomfortable in his own skin. The times I couldn't be there, since I always couldn't make that drive to see him, seemed to push him closer and closer to his breaking point. I think something happened to him while he was in jail. When he finally got out, I eventually moved back in with him, and that's when he took a nosedive into hard drugs. One night we had some people over at the house, and he was really overdoing it, if you know what I mean. He kind of went off into his own world. Even when our friends left, he really didn't seem to notice or care. I went upstairs to go to sleep,
You need
while he
help.
stayed downstairs. I laid down in the bed, and shortly after, I fell asleep. Suddenly, my entire body was shaking. I opened my eyes to see Jake violently shaking me. I looked at him, and I immediately became terrified. His eyes were bloodshot and crazed, and he was panting like some kind of rabid dog.
You punched him square
Where
in
is
his
it?
tooth.
He barked. I asked him what he was talking about, and he seemed angered by this. Where is it? He asked again more aggressively. At this point, my initial fear had passed, and I then became very annoyed at the situation. I told him I didn't know what the fuck he was talking about, and then I rolled over in bed and tried to go back to sleep. He went back downstairs, and the next thing I know, I hear glass smashing and things being thrown around. I get up to see what's going on, and he comes barreling up the stairs and shoves me to the ground, coming down on top of me and pinning me to the floor. Mind you, I'm only 5'5", 130 pounds, and he's 6'4", almost 200 pounds.
Jeez.
I had my phone in my hand, and he pried it away from me. At this point, I'm now horrified all over again. It was like something alien had taken him over. He was looking at me like how a lion stares down their prey. He looked into my eyes, and after a long silence, he said, "Don't tell anyone. Your phone, they can track it.
Oh
Everyone
boy.
knows you're here. They can't know you're here."
His motherfucker's on.
At this
meth
point, I start
shit.
struggling, trying to get away from him. He grips me harder and says 3 words I'll never forget. I killed someone. After a few seconds, he suddenly lets go of me, bursts into tears, and runs away. I put on some clothes and book it out of the house, running as fast as I could to my car. When I got in and turned the key, I glance over to see him running straight at me. I scream, and before I could put my car into reverse and back out of the driveway, he forced open the hood of my car and pulled something out of the engine. At this point, I
What?
realized that I had left my phone in the house. Once he had got
fuck?
done tampering with my car's engine, he shut the hood and left, taking whatever he had pulled out with him inside. I sat there in the car, unsure of what to do. I could see him through the downstairs window. He was looking all around, for God knows what. He was so focused on keeping me there and finding whatever he was looking for. As I sat in the car, I started sobbing. The car was still running, but I don't know what he pulled out of it. I didn't want to drive away and have the car break down, so I decided to make a run for it. The neighbors were close by, and all I had to do was make it to next door quickly. I waited for him to be out of sight. I then opened the car door and bolted. As I was running, I heard the sound of shoes on pavement from behind me.
Of course.
I turn, and I see him chasing me. His
Jeez.
bloodshot eyes were fixated on me. I was now screaming for my life. I ran to the neighbors and beat on the door. When they opened it, I rushed inside and locked the door behind me. I then braced myself for Jake to slam into the door, but he didn't. I looked out the peephole, and he was nowhere in sight. The neighbors let me use their phone, and I called my parents to come get me. I left my belongings and my phone at Jake's place, and technically the car that I was using was in his name, so I left that there too. I have never spoken to him again. I shudder when I think about his bloodshot eyes staring me down, and the way he chased me down that day. That was the wake-up call I needed to get my shit together. I called the police and told them what he had said to me,
Hey, I
but I
bet.
never heard any follow-up. I figured that it might have been just the drugs talking, but if I had stayed with him, there's no telling what could have happened to me.
You'd have been the person you killed.
When I was 15, my family planned a summer trip to visit my aunt and younger cousin Fred, who was 13 at the time. My aunt's house is a quiet country home surrounded by fields and dirt roads. There were porches on both the front and back of the house, making it look authentically country. Even though we were surrounded by the beauty of the countryside,
Who else
it
expected
didn't take long
Gladiator
for
to
Fred
start
and I to
walking
become
through,
bored.
raising his
The
hand
sun was
across
beginning
the
to go down,
glass?
the light was dimming, and the temperature was perfect for a stroll. Fred and I decided to take this time as an invitation to sneak out through the field behind the house. The field ended into a dirt road. We walked less than a half a mile, and we could see the dim lights at the parking lot of a small canning factory. By the way it smelled, I figured they probably canned boiled peanuts. We actually walked up to the back of the plant, where they parked delivery trucks for the night. The trucks are the type that have double doors on the back of them, and you only have to open one side to get in. Fred walked up to the back of one of the parked trucks and pulled on the door, and surprisingly, it was unlocked. We climbed right into the back. It was dark and empty. I shut the second door behind us, but I didn't close it all the way, leaving a small crack for a tiny bit of light to come through. Lucky for us, I had my cell phone with me, and I could use the flashlight. Of course, like every idiot teenager, we thought it would be cool to graffiti our own initials on the back of the truck. After we had our fun, and as we were just about to exit the truck, Fred caught the glimpse of someone through the opening in the door. He stopped in his tracks and became totally frozen, giving me a chance to look as well. I could see that a figure was walking across the parking lot, opposite the truck. I thought this could have been a security guard. Fred started freaking out and hyperventilating. The man must have heard him because in that moment, he turned around and started walking in our direction. I put my hand over Fred's mouth and we both crouched down against the closed door. My head was flat against the door, with one eye looking through the slight opening. The man was now standing right outside the crack between the doors, only mere feet from us. How in the world he never opened the door, I'll never know. He was looking right through the opening in the door. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I could see his nasty, rotten teeth as he opened his mouth and coughed. Unbelievably, he never touched the doors. He just turned around and started walking towards the entrance of the plant. That's when we made a break for it. With a loud thump, my cousin's feet hit the asphalt. Before I jumped down, we both saw the creepy man standing at a short distance. He was wearing a black hoodie and ripped jeans. There was a large scar on his face from his mouth to his right eye, and I could see his broken teeth twisted into a grin. His appearance was so unsettling that I still have never forgotten about it to this day. I leapt down to the ground from the back of the truck, and that's when the man pulled out a knife. Before I could even get the word "run" out of my mouth, Fred was out of there like a bat out of hell. I truly didn't know Fred could sprint that fast as he left me behind. I then booked it, and the man took off after me. I could hear him growling and yelling profanities at us from behind me. We made our way into the fields, and it wasn't long before I could see the lights of my aunt's house in the distance.
Hyperventilating,
I
turning
took one
into
last
Usain
look
Bolt.
behind me, and all I could see was a dark hooded figure standing among the tall blades of grass, watching us flee. And even though it had become considerably darker, I swear I could see the man's deranged smile from under his hood. I made it to the back of the porch alongside Fred, who was gasping for breath. We told our family everything that happened, leaving out the part about us being in the back of the truck, for obvious reasons. My aunt called the police, and after about a half an hour, an officer came. They found the man. It turns out he was a former employee of the factory, who had been let go because of his severe mental issues.
So
Ever
he's
since
just
then,
walking around.
I never go out after dark unarmed. Who knows what would have happened if that lunatic had opened up those doors and found us.
You'd be dead. The police would have found 2 bodies, brutally stabbed to death.
There's always a reason to be afraid.
I like that. There's always a reason to be afraid. What the fuck is wrong with my throat? I've heard this music somewhere. Like I don't know if it's a royalty free. Or maybe he made this music. And some just sounds similar. It could be I'm thinking about uh, I'm thinking about another another TV show or something like that. What was the TV show? It was Unsolved Mysteries. Like dun 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 dun. Like anyway, like these stories, like some of these people in certain situations. But that first one, he was in his own home, and I was just fucked up. Dude literally did a Shining and tried to just murder his ass with an axe. And that shit was crazy. That's one thing. Like I always worry. Sometimes at night I go downstairs to get some water or something, and or a lot of times it's during the day because I work nights most of the time. But whenever I go down at night, it's pitch black. So I'm always worried that somebody's waiting down there just to just punch me square in the face. And I wake up tied up to a chair, and some sadist, just does Chinese torture to my ass. Like, I don't know. Even during the day, like I always, every time I hear something like, I use my damn knife and walk down. I mean, at least I have something. I have my gun, like it's a knife, and I have that, but this. But that's, I mean, I've had some scary situations. It's not home invasion. I've never been in a home invasion. But I've had strangers like knock on the door and then you don't answer it. Especially when I was a kid. Like, my dad was like, you better not answer that door. He's like, I found out you answered the door, I'm going to beat you. That's pretty much me. I remember when I was a little, like, I might have been 6. No, maybe it was 7, I don't know, somewhere there. I remember someone knocked on the door, and then they were trying to look, and I saw them looking in the window, and I was like by the stairs, and it was a wall where you could like look around and see the window, and I could have sworn that guy saw me, and then I kind of just he went away, and I was like, all right. I went back upstairs, and all of a sudden I heard another noise. And I was thinking to myself, what was that noise? It sounded like a door opening, but not like the front door. I knew that door, how that door sounded open. I was like, it sounded like a screen door or something, but we had a screen door in the front, and a screen door on the back, a screen door, not on the back door, but like on the side door of the house. We had like a front door, side door, and then a back door. And somebody had opened this because I was walking and I was trying to look because it was like a diamond-shaped window on the door, on the side door. I was trying to look. Somebody had opened that door, but it slammed back when they let it go because they would like close a little bit and then it would go boom and slam right on the end. And I remember walking back there, not seeing it. And I remember walking out of that it was like a little walkway, and it was a bathroom. It was like a half bathroom, and then there was a little wall, and there was a kitchen. In the kitchen, and we had like the dining table and stuff. And then the back door was back there. But it was a big window, so you could look outside. Right before I walked, like I just right before I walked past the wall, I caught a glimpse of someone standing at the back door, and I stopped and went back and was like down the wall. I was like, what the fuck? And it was a skinny black, it was the same guy from the front. He was like looking. First went to look through the door. You couldn't really look through the window. Like you could, like he did in the front, but you couldn't really look through the window. But he was trying, but he kept like trying to look through the door. But it was even it was like a square hole in that back door, and a square window in the back door. And he kept trying to like look in and stuff. I was like, what the fuck is that? Well, I wasn't cursing, but I was like, what's that? And I was so scared. Like, I didn't know who to do. I was like, he tried to kick the door in. I didn't know what was, and I was there by myself. And well, he ended up just leaving, but it was weird because I heard the screen door, cause, not the screen door, but I heard him going down the steps at the back door. So I looked out, and I looked out the window, and I kind of, cause we had like you could look up over the window, and I was looking. He went out and walked out our back gate into the alley, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, he kind of looked disheveled. He might have been a crackhead or something. But I remember that when I was a little kid. That scared the fuck out of me. That was scary. But anyway, I hope y'all enjoy my reaction, everybody, and my little horror story. When I was a kid, that nothing happened besides just some creep walk around my house looking at it. But let me know some scary moments in your life, maybe like that you experienced in the comments down below. And remember to like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace.